Good day and welcome back to my channel. So this is the first in the series of build for the Battletech Locust in 1/60 scale. So this is going to be a little bit of a story, a little bit of storytelling before I get started, and then we'll talk about where we're going to go and what this build is going to be about. So many years back in, say, 1987, I'd seen, back then there were like these model magazines where people had where there were articles about how to do this and how to do that. And one of the things that was done was a scratch-built model of a Battletech Locust. The Locust, one of the Scout Battlemechs from the Battletech series, or Battletech gaming world, in 1/35 scale, where they had taken essentially a floss container, like a Johnson & Johnson floss container, and built up the torso out of it and made a really cool 1/35 scale version of a Battletech Locust Battlemech. And that was like really cool. So I had recently found Battletech as a gaming environment, gaming world, and the environment really spoke to me. It was really cool as a concept and as a environment. And then, the series of books came out that explored the world, and then this article came out on how to do this, or how to do this 1/35 scale mech. And it was more of a, hey, here's my result, and these are the things I used. It was not anywhere near as good as the how-tos we have these days with all the Instube stuff and everything. So, but that stuck with me, right? So that whole picture stuck with me, and I wanted to do that. Unfortunately, the me in that year lacked both the resources, the skill, and the tools to be able to pull that off. I made an attempt a couple of times over the years and totally failed miserably. So fast forward, FCY Tim Fusco is making these 1/60 scale 28 millimeter gaming size battle mechs, and comes out with, hey, I'm going to do a Locust. Well, okay, that just sort of pushed the button. The style of Locust he's doing is what you see here, and this is much more the Mech Warrior Online version, sort of a mesh of old school and MWO, but this is a much more realistic, I don't want to say realistic, but it's got a better feel for how the compartmentalization works for the battle mech, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I recently had done a series, and I'll put a link down here below of the same scale version of a catapult, which is the same world, same scale of a larger mech, a 65-ton mech that's a missile boat. And I was kind of hoping that doing that would sort of scratch that itch, and I could put that project to bed. But no, all it really did was fuel the fire for doing the Locust. So I had picked up this Locust from FCY, and I've done an unboxing for that. I will also put that link down below. And I'm going to go ahead, and I would like to do a diorama of the Locust. So let's talk about that. So that's the why of this series, right? And what the thought is. So let's talk about what this is going to be. So what I'm really going to do is I'm going to do a diorama, which is, I don't often do a lot of dioramas, mostly because of space issues. I did the Space 1999, but that was the kit itself. But I do dioramas here and again, but they're rare because of, it takes up space and whatever. But to me, when I make a build, the diorama tells a story, or the build itself tells a story, like the Black Pearl, right? When I did the Black Pearl, every scratch, every dent, every discoloration, that all had a meaning. There was something around that, so I hear a story in my head as I'm building a model kit. You'll hear people talk about that when they're doing 35th scale armor, things like that, like Night Shift or Panzermeister, right? When they're weathering their kits, there's a reason for what they do, and that story makes that weathering and the build look realistic and have a sense of realism to it. And that's what we're kind of going to do here. So first of all, this is you really don't see a lot of these in a realistic type setting. You see Battlemechs in sort of a cartoony type look, and I'm going for realistic. I'm going for realistic armor in a realistic sort of look. So the diorama I have in my head is of a Locust Battlemech out in the field doing a field refit and reload repair kind of look, and I want to give it this sort of periphery pirate feel. And what that means for those not familiar with Battletech, the periphery worlds, the worlds on the outside of the main political structure of the star systems of the inner sphere that are Battletech. They're sort of one-off worlds that are more like, our world today. They have your own little warring factions in among. It's not multiple worlds as a a single political block. You have this world, and even on that world, you have multiple political blocks on that single world. So they're fighting over hundreds of acres versus hundreds of star systems. And it's small. It's it's dirty. It's mercenary. You have mercenaries all over the place. Merc work, and the interesting thing about Battlemechs is Battlemechs, and I mentioned this when I did the catapult. Battlemechs have been around for centuries. In this time frame, in this world, the ability to rebuild and make new Battlemechs does not exist anymore. So you have these war machines that have been upkept and repaired and repaired and repaired, and you've made do with fitting other parts that aren't original, like pieces, and made things do, and these things for centuries, right? So these are, you kind of look at it as the mech warriors, the pilots of the Battlemech are sort of the feudal knights of the era, and these Battlemechs are their steeds, and the mechs serve, the pilots, they send them down through family. So whereas in the Middle Ages, the estate would be what you inherited father to son or down the line. In the Battletech era, the Battlemech itself is your estate, right? So when a pilot would lose a battle or would die, the Battlemech would pass on to their next best generation, their next pilot, etc., right? So that's your inheritance. The feel here is sort of a periphery pirate. All they have is this light Battlemech. They're a lone merc unit, really small. They're very, that's sort of the feel for it. It's going to have sort of a post-apocalyptic kind of look feel, right? So that's sort of the concept, right? So the plan is to have a diorama of the Locust, a support crew of a couple of support people, and the pilot itself. And I'm using these toughest girls of the galaxies from Raging Heroes as the miniatures for it. And I also will be doing a support vehicle, this Japan Ground Self-Defense Force light armored vehicle, because that sort of fits the environment. So that's the dio, right? So that's where we're going. Let's talk about this now. We waffled on about that, about the what's for whatever. So I've gotten the legs together, and basically the Locust will be at rest and will be being refit and reloaded. I do have a couple ground crew, right? So I need to build the ground such that this piece looks appropriate, but sort of a lookout, and then the mech warrior, the pilot, and then basically I just put that together, and then gave her. I didn't like the way her hair was done, so I did that. And then this is a loader support person. Now she's in a funky pose because she's going to be sitting up on the torso of the Locust, like right about here, with some shell reloads in her hand, and she can be just parked up on there, with her foot through the rope ladder going down, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's where she's going to be. So those are the crew, and this is the torso of the Locust. Now the nice thing about this, and this is what I like about this kit, and I mentioned this just a moment ago, is this looks like it has room for a cockpit, right? So if this is our person, it looks like it has room for a tight cockpit, whereas the Locust, the original Locust, was like this big, long, flat thing. It almost looked like you had to drive it laying on your belly. This actually looks like it has room for a cockpit, which is, you know, part of what I'm going to do here. So the plan here is I'm going to take this and make a hollowed out version of it so that I can cut off the canopy and open this up and have a couple of open hatches that then show internal working. So like we've got the cockpit opened up, we can see into the cockpit, and then we can see the hatches. Now, what I've done is something I did for me, which I did a slush recast of this torso. You know, the only reason I did that is because the manufacturer was unable to get me a hollow rotocast version of this. Just, you know, by virtue of the way Tim was doing it, he wasn't able to get a decent slush cast for it, so I used my crude techniques to do so. The mold no longer exists. I just did it enough to get the piece that I needed, and that was all I had. So that mold is gone, and I now have the piece that I need so that I could do this. And this is kind of showing what I'm going to be doing. So once I had the whole thing cast, I sliced this top off so I could get room to do the things I want to do. And then I also removed where the canopy was. So in essence, when I'm done, that's going to go back on there. We will have a nice image of a cockpit here. And then here, that hatch right here will be propped open. You'll see a storage bin and a whole bunch of, you know, extra stuff in here, and you can see what looks like it would be like 2 entries to the same bin or whatever. But one of the other things I'm going to have is a rope ladder that comes out of here, drops down, because the Locust sits, you know, it's going to sit about that high off the ground. So how do you get up and down? And one of the things we'll do is we'll put a rope ladder. Now the cool thing is the way this character's feet are, if you'll look at it once I can get it there, see how her front foot is kind of cocked. That'll look really appropriate with that onto a rung of a rope ladder. So that'll actually work, and I won't have to modify the foot much. I did have to do modifications of the knee here, if I can get this to focus for me. There we go. With some green stuff, come on, so that it actually was rocked back onto that spot, but that'll then look okay there. So the goal here now is flip this over, build out a storage bin here, put storage and stowage into here, make it look interesting, paint that up, get a piece of flat styrene that is about the thickness of the armor, like you can see that hatch there, right? Prop it up and then build that out. Then the other part is to build an actual cockpit using, you know, whatever, and making so that when I put this back down on, I have a cockpit that looks appropriate to this scale of a person, which is much better than the original one. And that's where we're going to be able to see that, and then we'll have this either popped up like that or all the way flipped over, depending on really how I want to do it. But enough so that you can see into that detail, and that's kind of important what I'm going for. So this is that whole Battlemech at rest thing. The other thing I noticed, because I had slush cast this so thinly, you can see where I've got bends here and then bends there. So I'm going to need to reinforce these to make them look appropriate. Now, the way I cut this off was on purpose. Across here, I followed the seam lines between that plate and between these two plates, right? So you can see them a little more clearly there. But this here is on a flat piece, so that all I need to do to hide that seam is just lay a piece of armor that's in that shape over there. That'll cover that up nicely, and then I can detail it. Now, some of the downside of all this is the way the stuff I had, this is old plastic, is it also was full of bubbles because of the way it forms up. I couldn't vac seal it, and I couldn't do any of that. So I have a whole lot of bubbles and fill to do. Like there's bubbles here, and through here I'm going to need to be doing some work on. It buys me more work, but it saves me, it makes it's workable, right? but there's going to be a lot of detail work I'm going to need to do on this. And this is going to be sort of, there's going to be a lot of work to do for the diorama. I mean, and this is just one part of it, right? They've got the miniatures and I've also got the vehicle to do. But to make this look realistic compared to this, right? So I'm going to have this in there, and I've got to make this thing look as realistic and world live as this does. So that's this project. It's going to be quite a bit to do, and I'm going to try to do the best I can to do the how-tos. The reality is, like, so far all I've really done is a slush cast of the cockpit so that I could get the piece I need that I could cut and get what I needed out of it. And now it's a matter of building the parts, right? So I've done this. I've got the base chassis part done. Now I need to do all the detail work for the cockpit and the stowage bin. Then I have to put it all together. So that'll be probably the next step. I could also work, while that's working, I could also work on getting the base together. So like these two pieces here, this is it, like these are the legs, and that's about how they're going to go. So I can get those done and set up while I'm working on the other pieces. So for now, that's where we are. This one's going to be a bit of a long haul to get through all of the things that I need to do for this one. And it's going to be a challenge, but I'm looking forward to doing it. And it's one of those things that kind of hope the diorama comes out the way I'm looking for. So we will see next video where that is, how it looks, and then we'll go from there. So with that said, I will say thank you very much for watching. I hope this is informative and that you find this entertaining. And until next time, happy modeling.